Have you told your friends that you see ghosts?
Oh, absolutely not.
Gina Rodriguez returns in Not Dead Yet.
I'm back, baby.
Who is that?
Oh, she's the obituary writer.
And Brad Garrett joins the brilliant ensemble cast.
Titan, Maverick, Titan of all Mavericks. These are all words used to describe me.
Not Dead Yet. Season premiere. Tonight, 8:30, 7:30 Central on ABC. And stream on Hulu.
It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
I love what we get to do on the Happy Families podcast, talking to fascinating people who have done amazing things. All this week on the Happy Families podcast, well, Kylie's going to take a week off, and I'm having a chat with people who have stories to tell about how life turned out, even if school wasn't the most successful experience for them. The reason that we're doing this is because Year 12 students around the country either are sitting or are about to sit their exams. Depends on which state you're in as to whether or not the kids are doing it right now or not. My guest today, first guest of the week, I can't wait to introduce you to him. His name is Ian Steele. He's from Adelaide, the founder of South Australian charity Kickstart for Kids. Also a business owner, dad to 4 kids, including 1 foster child. Ian, great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
I also forgot to mention Australia Day Citizen of the Year 2019. This is a pretty fancy pants bio. We're kicking off with some awesome stuff. Ian, because this week is all about school, I'm particularly interested in what kind of a student you were. Did you gravitate to a particular subject? Were you a knockout student who just knew how to get everything right? What was school like for you?
Well, I gravitated to getting out of school as quickly as I could, to be honest. School was not a big part of my life. I reckon, and I reckon as you get older and you become a father, school is for some people and school isn't for others. And school certainly wasn't for me. I had a lot of close mates and it wasn't really for them either. I think boys are certainly different than girls and boys grow up later in life. But, look, I was terrible at school. I couldn't wait to get out of there. I sort of took the first job I could. But in saying that, ever since then, I have been trying to better myself, and I've got to say it is hard without an education.
So I want to get to that in just a sec. A couple more questions about your schooling experience. Did you finish Year 12?
No.
Where did you drop out, and what did you do when you left?
Well, I dropped out. I struggled through to Year 11, I guess. I dropped out in Year 11, start of Year 11, or halfway through Year 11, I guess. And I went into like they called it a trainee wool buyer. Right at the time, it was a trainee wool buyer. Yeah, so basically, I was a labourer. I was the youngest. It's not a good thing joining the workforce at a really young age. I went to work and I basically got bullied for 2 or 3 years. I can distinctly remember. I would have been 18. I was cheeky, rude, probably pretty full of myself, and used to get stuck into the older blokes, and one bloke turned around and belted me sort of 3 times at one stage. And that's how it is. Back in the day when you left school early, there was no work safe or anything like that. It was tough.
Why was school so hard for you?
Well, I reckon I had, like these days, ADHD is diagnosed, right? But back in the day, ADHD certainly wasn't diagnosed, and I've got ADHD. I can't sit still, I can't concentrate, and sitting, in a classroom for that long just didn't suit me. And also my parents split up when I was about 15, and that was pretty tough. And my mum didn't have a lot of money, and she was always at me to go and get a job, help the family.
So, Ian, as you're going through school, you're struggling, family's kind of falling apart a little bit, you're inattentive and kind of active. What got you as far as halfway through Year 11? Like, how did you manage to stay at school that long? Because it sounds like it was a really, really big challenge.
It was. I had to get a job. That's I couldn't leave without a job because we certainly didn't have any money in the family. I needed to contribute to. I think I earned $90 when I first got a job, and I gave $30 to my mum every week. I needed to get a job before I left.
So you go and get this job, and like you said, it's tough. You're young, you're immature, you've probably got a little bit too big a head on those little shoulders. And I mean, the research that's just been published in the last couple of months from the federal government shows that young people who go into trades and apprenticeships and traineeships, massive dropout rate. Like more than 50% of them drop out without completing any kind of qualification, any kind of apprenticeship, any kind of trade. Did you hang tight with that first job, or did you kind of get on the job merry-go-round, trying a range of things? How long did you stay put? And
no, yeah, I stayed there for 4 years.
Yeah,
absolutely.
wow.
And then I went into a trade. So when I was young, the trades weren't as prolific as they are now. Otherwise, I would have probably got into a trade straight away. So I stayed there for 4 years. And then went into a trade after that.
As I listen to the story and the way you're telling it, it certainly sounds like the world is not quite as, I want to say easy, but that doesn't feel like the right word. But the world feels like there are more options if you've done well at school, if you've got maybe that set of grades that can set you up for tertiary education. Would you agree with that? Or do you think that the 18-year-old Ian Steele did actually make the right choice doing the things that you did?
Yeah. Look, I don't. I've got two boys of my own who are dyslexic and have ADHD. School, they hate school. But I got them through to year 12. I've got one through to year 12. I've got one who now is 16 in year 10, or nearly 17 in year 10. It's important to stay at school. I really believe it's important to stay at school, not only for the options you might have later in life, but for your community, right? For your friends. I mean, you don't realise until you've left school that school is the only place you see your friends every day without trying. As soon as you leave school, you lose that community and that friendship straight away. I think that in a perfect world, I think education is a great thing, and in my charity, it's all about education. It's all about trying to get these kids through to the end of year 12 so they can become a valuable member of the community and a valuable employee.
I want to talk about the charity, but just as a quick aside before we step into that, along the way, as you got that trade and kept on building and developing, you've owned a pub, you've run a fruit and veg shop, you've had a construction business, you've sold a widget business. I mean, you keep on developing these ideas, and on top of all of it, with no high school education, on top of all of it, you've gone and started this charity. Tell me about how Kickstart for Kids came about.
I will. Well, let's just go back to my story. So, I left school completely uneducated, right? And I've always had a burning desire to be better than what I was. So every move I've made, I might have bought a business and I've sold it, but every time I little fruit and veg business, I sold that, and I went into a pub, sold that, went into something else. So it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right, as we go. If you don't get an education, that is really what you have to do. So if you don't get a tertiary education, you've really got to, if you really want to make it in this world, unfortunately, you've got to own your own business. So that's what I did, and I sort of realised that I didn't have an education, so I had to build businesses up and become successful, and then sell them, and then you build another one up and sell it. And that's worked pretty well for me. But Kickstart for Kids, how did that come about? That basically came about from doing some mentoring for the education department. I've always been interested in helping young kids and coaching footy and whatever. And I was just doing some work in a lower socioeconomic school, and just noticed that the behavioural difference was massive between those kids in that school and where my kids went to school, and just went on from there. And obviously then found out about all these disadvantaged kids and the horrific social circumstances they were living with. And it's all about breaking the cycle of unemployment and poverty. And you only can do that through education. So we have to keep the kids at school. So everything that we run, a breakfast program, a lunch program, mentoring, a period poverty program, a vacation camp program is all about well-being and keeping the kids at school so they can get educated and finish school.
So they're the aims of the charity. But how did it actually start? So you're doing this work in this school with the Department of Education, and you notice that there are behavioural differences in the two places. But what then? I mean, the way you tell the story at this point, it sounds like you saw a need, and all of a sudden you've created a charity that's aimed at helping kids get through school. But what does that look like? And what did it look like at the very start when you saw the need?
Yeah, sure. I'm pretty blasé about it. You're right. But yeah, so I had a construction business at the time, a building business. I couldn't take all those kids at home, but I realised they were all starving. So they didn't have anything to eat, right? And as a young father, I knew how unmanageable my kids were when they were hungry. That's what these kids were portraying. So I decided how are we going to get them to school? How are we going to get them to school on time? And how are we going to make them happy so they start in the classroom? Well, let's give them some breakfast and give them some lunch. So I went down to the shopping centre and filled up the back of my ute with as much product as I could and set up a breakfast program and off it went from there, really.
The reason I really want to drill down onto this is because people see this need all the time, right? Like you show up at the school or you show up at whatever it is and you can see that there's need, that there's disadvantage or that there's some challenge or whatever. But then you've not only seen that there's a need, you've decided to go and round up a whole lot of food, ask for a whole lot of donations, and then you've literally just, chucked it in the back of the ute and driven to the school and said, hey, I've got breakfast, kids.
Basically, that's how it happened. Yeah, obviously, it's a bit more complicated than that, but that's certainly how the first one started. And, I did that before work, for 10 years with my family and just went out and ran breakfast programs and took kids as much food as we could. And obviously the media got hold of it and then it just sort of snowballed and grew from there. But yeah, I saw a need and I did something about it. We all say that we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but we don't necessarily go out and do it. I reckon blokes are renowned for that. Whether it be going for a run or not having a beer or whatever it is. We're renowned for saying stuff and not doing it, and I was certainly renowned for it. But this rocked my world. I had to do something about it, and off we went.
So what I want to ask you is, were you always that kid? Like when you were that 15, 16-year-old kid in a really nice Adelaide school, were you mindful of other people and their needs? Were you involved in charity and service and volunteering when you were a kid? Is that who you've always been? No, not at all. And look, let's relate it to your podcast here about education and whether you need education. I think we all need life skills, right? And I was the most hedonistic, selfish 16, 17, 18-year-old you could ever imagine. And, I was only worried about myself and my 3 or 4 close mates and where our next beer was coming from and what we were doing on the weekend. But blokes, males, boys, mate, we don't grow up until we're late 20s, really mid-20s. And some might say a little later, just between you and me, and some might say just a little later. Yeah.
Absolutely, even later. And mums and dads get so wrapped up in exactly what you're talking about. Exams. How are they going to go? You're not studying enough. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. At the end of the day, exams mean nothing, right? I believe if you can get through to year 12, right, it doesn't matter what happens in your exams, because what you do when you leave school, I absolutely guarantee you're not going to be doing it when you're 28 or 32 or 35. We all grow up and we all change our ideas and our ideals and our beliefs, and we get better as we mature, and we finally find out what we're good at and what we want to do when we mature.
I've just got to share this with you. I think it'll resonate so strongly. When I'm talking about topics like this in schools and in organizations around the country, doing the various talks that I give, I always ask this question. I'll ask parents to please put up their hand nice and high if they are still doing today what they thought they'd be doing when they finished year 12. And it's about 20% of hands go up. The other 80% stay down. And then I say, okay, so if you had a plan and it didn't work out that way and you're doing something totally different, put up your hand. And then literally 80% of hands go up. And I think that the point that I'm hearing you make, and it's the one that I make as well, is we're putting all this pressure on our kids to get this result because the year 12 exams become this exclamation mark on your education. But your education in many ways really starts out of school, doesn't it?
Of course it does. And we all know that whatever you achieve in that year 12 result can be overturned when you actually know what you want to do by going and applying for a different course at uni. I often speak to parents who are still parenting their 19-year-olds about not going to uni. Like, these kids have been at school for the last 18 years and their parents want them to go and jump into uni the year after. Oh my God, please let them go and do whatever they want to do for 4 or 5 years and then maybe go to uni or get a higher education.
So what do you do with your kids? You've got 3 of your own children. You've got a foster child who I presume you treat as your own anyway. What's the conversation look like in your home when it comes to, I mean, you've already mentioned that there's some additional needs and additional support necessary, but what's the conversation look like and sound like as your kids move into those later high school years?
It's about being happy. If you're not happy, then you're not being the best person you can be. Obviously I've told you about my boys. If I can get my 16-year-old to get to year 12, well, that'll be fantastic. But if he's still at school and he's just not happy at all, well, then he goes and gets a trade to be happy. Right now, my elder son, who started a school-based apprenticeship, we got him through to year 12, and then he started full-time employment straight the year after. My girls, and it's a lot different, right? Girls are more studious. So my girls, they did all the things that they needed to get through to year 12. One studied a little better than the other one, but they both got into nursing. But none of them, they're not doing nursing. They're both having fun and they've got part-time jobs and they are living their best life. They might go back to nursing next year. I'm sure at some stage they'll get sick of working part-time jobs, but they will certainly, and they'll go back and go to uni. But they just felt that they weren't going to be happy studying straight after year 12.
Ian, I've loved the conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story. My understanding is that Kickstart for Kids is now in over 360 South Australian schools. Is that about right?
That's right. 60,000 breakfasts, 10,000 lunches, 360 schools and 1,000 volunteers.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Love your drive, love your passion, love your story. I think this is going to be so beneficial for so many parents. Thank you, Ian.
Good on you, mate. Thanks for the chat.
That's father of 4, Ian Steele, married to Georgie, Adelaide born and bred. Went to one of the most prestigious schools in Adelaide, picked up the Australia Day Citizen of the Year in 2019, the founder of Kickstart for Kids, business owner, and just an incredible story about a guy who didn't do so well at school, obviously values education and knows how important it is, but highlights that there is so much more to life than what you get on your year 12 exams. So good luck as you have your conversations with the kids about education and about the decisions that they're making, and particularly about how they're going to go with their year 12 exams. Tomorrow we have a chat with another fascinating guy. His name is Cam Barber. Cam has mentored CEOs. He has mentored movie companies, Fortune 500 companies in the US, and for those who love the AFL, the Hawthorn Football Club. And we're going to find out why he quit uni on day 1. All this week, conversations about education and how what happens in year 12 may or may not be the most important thing that can ever happen in your kid's life. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon for Bridge Media. We have Craig Bruce as our executive producer. For more information about making your family happier, visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.